Hello there and welcome. I hope you are well this week, wherever you may be. I'm going to begin by talking about the Emperor of China, and then go slowly through some important statements Gurdjieff made. And I have some revelations about the real meaning of the suffering of Jesus Christ. I saw the movie The Last Emperor, Puyi, the last one, of China, who was born in 1906 and died in 1967. He was born in a walled fortress and had no idea until later that China had moved on and that he and his household and that palace were a kind of museum. Later, when things broke up, he fled to a colonial hotel where he lived the life of a playboy. And towards the end of his life, the communist revolution took over China, and he was imprisoned and tortured, and made to confess that he was and had always been just like everybody else, because we are all equal. It's a great movie, and you can see parallels of that in America today and understand really what is happening. It is said that the Emperor of China had the mandate of heaven. In other words, he was tethered to the transcendent. He received the transcendent and was the emissary of it into this world. And perhaps he was, a very long time ago. And what is it to be an emperor? Is it not to be the best? The best at everything, the best at hand-to-hand combat, the best at directing and leading an army on the battlefield, the best at medicine, the best conveyor of ancient wisdom, metaphysics and religion, the best at loving, the best at fighting, the best seamstress and the best gardener. Only that is an emperor, and an emperor that people of the earth no longer really know. In the line of the octave, the lead must exert strong pressure, and that pressure travels down and keeps all subsequent forces together. But if he weakens, one day those who follow him will no longer receive anything, no longer be able to do any work. They will no longer get anything out of that old idea of life. And they will turn, they will fragment, all according to law. You see that today with young people who rebel against the Western world. They no longer get anything out of it, and they have no option. Even if they wanted to, they have no option but to go their own way. And eventually they become ashamed of their past. They feel no connection with it and want to burn it all down. They want to burn down the cathedrals because every time they see something of such immense beauty that they are no longer connected to, they feel sick inside and they don't want to see it anymore. And corruption always begins at the top. For all their talking, human beings are hellishly unconscious and act together more like a flock of birds wheeling blindly in the sky according to external forces that they know nothing about. In that movie, the communists wanted the emperor to sign a confession. Why? Why is because they don't consider themselves to be communist revolutionaries. For them, the previous world just doesn't make any sense. I was in a farmer's market this weekend, and there is a little old Asian lady there who makes the most beautiful food. Coconut and ginger tarts, kale and spinach pakoras. She really is amazing because each of her delicacies is made differently, an individual creation of beauty. And her range grows slowly. This week she had some chocolate creations I hadn't seen before. She's a small lady, but she looks tired, and she looks strong in her arms, because she works hard, and her work is an art, and she is an evergreen tree that keeps growing. And those that do not grow are dying. That is the law. Americans are very nice. They were fragmented from the European people and don't really understand much about European culture. They destroy everything and are very friendly in the morning. And there can be no progress because different eras have different questions. They live in a different way. They are not looking for the same thing as those people in the past. It is not that one man adds a new bit of knowledge to the knowledge of the past. And without a link through the generations, this world is condemned to being ploughed under and the massive pain that causes. 1 century destroys everything that was made by the previous, and they're all happy in the morning. Gurdjieff says that wars are not decreasing, they are increasing, and war cannot be stopped by ordinary means. There is momentum to these things. And I have personally been very harmed by some people who live quite close to me in this area, but there's not a damn thing I can do about it. I fret about it a lot, but in the end, if the earth wants to destroy me, what can I do? There are some things that I can do, but there are some things that I cannot do. I have to conform to this world and the new rhythms of the younger people, whether I like it or not. But inside, the work continues. It must continue. And when momentum stops, you would be surprised at the things the people around you start doing. How many people will join in to kick a man when he is down? These people can be very dangerous. It often happens that, having stopped before some barrier, usually the smallest and the most simple, students turn against the work, against the teacher, and against other members of the group, and accuse them of the very thing that is being revealed to them in themselves. Sometimes they repent later and blame themselves. Then they again blame others. Then they repent once more, and so on. But there is nothing that shows up a man better than his attitude towards the work and the teacher after he has left it. My initial training was in various schools where there were very traditional and honourable people teaching there. They taught according to tradition. They tried to do everything that their teacher did, and in that way, even if they themselves were not self-realized. There are quite a number of schools like that. I happened to read this in a book about the Fangshi, who were men of great esoteric power in ancient China, and who could read the angles and direction of the wind, amongst other very subtle things. It says, His inborn capabilities were vast, and he could learn a great deal. He was above feeling enmity, even for those who expressed resentment towards him. At the same time, he did not particularly incline towards those who showed him favour. Rather, he sought always to return good deeds for whatever injustice was done to him. His attendance on his father and mother was devoted, and he was warm towards his brothers. He treated friends and peers with affection and respect, and to the end never failed to strike the proper balance in his relation with people. Even those among his contemporaries who harboured ill will towards him would always be won over. I was remembering this week an episode Gurdjieff had with a dervish. I'll just read it out. At that time, I was an ardent follower of the famous Indian yogis and carried out very exactly all the indications of what is called Hatha Yoga, and when eating I tried to masticate my food as thoroughly as possible. So long after everyone, including the old man, had finished their simple meal, I continued slowly eating, trying not to swallow a single morsel without masticating it according to all the rules. Seeing this, the dervish asked me, "Tell me, young stranger, why are you eating like that?" I was so sincerely astonished by this question, I felt not only pity but also ashamed for him, and replied with self-assurance that I chewed my food carefully so that it might be better assimilated in the intestines, and referring to the well-known fact that properly digested food gives the organism a larger quantity of calories necessary for our functions, I repeated all that I had extracted from various books on the subject. But the old dervish said, "If you chew in this way as a means to health or for the sake of other attainments, then I shall have to say, if you would like to know my sincere opinion, that you have chosen the worst possible way. By chewing your food so carefully, you reduce the work of your stomach. Now you are young and everything is all right, but you are accustoming your stomach to do nothing, and when you are older, owing to the lack of normal work, your muscles will be to a certain extent atrophied, and that is bound to occur if you continue this system of chewing. You know that our muscles and body get weaker in old age. Now, in addition to the natural weakness of old age, you will have another brought on by yourself, because you are accustoming your stomach not to work. Can you imagine how it will be then? On the contrary, it is not at all necessary to masticate carefully. At your age it is better not to chew at all, but to swallow whole pieces, even bones if possible, to give work to your stomach. I can see that those who have advised you to practice this mastication, and also those who write books about it, have, as is said, heard a bell without knowing where the sound came from. And I ask you, isn't this the very same thing as those people who don't want to have negative emotions? Isn't it that they don't want to do any work? They don't want to work their body. They imagine that living in a white citadel, things are going to work out for them, because then they won't be negative. But the point is not to not be negative. The point is to fucking work. And what work will you do if you don't work with your negative emotions? Do you think it belongs to somebody else, or that it's going to vaporize? Who are these people really? If you look at the New Age and all these people on the internet, who are they? Do you know who these people are? And let's contrast this attitude with the attitude of the Catholic saints of the Middle Ages. Saint Christina said after she died I was carried into paradise to the throne of the Divine Majesty. When I saw that the Lord was well pleased with me and wished me joy, I rejoiced above all measure, thinking that I would remain with the Lord forever after. At once the Lord answered my desire and said, "Certainly, my dearest, you will be with me here, but now I offer you two choices, either to remain with me or to return to the body and undergo there the punishment of the immortal soul in a mortal body without damage to it, and by these your sufferings, to deliver all those souls on whom you have compassion in that place of purgatory, and by the example of your suffering and your way of life to convert living men to me, and make them turn aside from their sins, and after you have done all these things, to return to me, having accumulated for yourself a reward." I answered without hesitation that I wished to return. Then Saint Christina began to do those things for which she had been sent back to life by the Lord. She crept into the very ovens where bread was baking, and was tormented by the fire, just like any of us mortals, so that her howls were terrible to hear. Nevertheless, when she emerged, no mutilation of any sort appeared in her body. In people's houses she would throw herself into those fires, or at least she would thrust her feet and hands into the flames, and held them there for so long that they would have been reduced to ashes had it not been a divine miracle. Two priests that were acquainted with Saint Christina followed her as far as the rapidly flowing river Meuse. When they reached the river's edge, they rejoiced because they thought they could seize her, but stupefied they observed the woman in front of them enter the deep streams of the water like a phantasm, and come out untouched on the other side. Often in cold weather she would remain for a long time under the waters of the river. Indeed, frequently she stayed there for 6 or more days at a time. But the priest who took care of her came and stood on the river bank, and adjured her by the name of Christ, and thus she was forced to come out. Now let me ask you, do you think these old stories are just a fabrication, and that we're all the same, we're all equal? This week, feeling that I needed more help, I went back to the Buddhist practice with the medicine Buddha, which I had been taught about 15 years ago on a short retreat. I can do it much better today, and after some hours of intensive practice, I noticed two things. The first is that the world that I see with my eyes, looked translucent, as if it wasn't fully real. And the second thing that I noticed was that my thought had somehow increased in its clarity. I could understand more. And that whatever you think of people, each one, and in an unconscious way, has developed a certain kind of energetic emanation so that they can get what they want. They don't fully inhabit their body, or their soul, or even their faces. They are not connected properly to what they should be. And so they activate certain energies. People have learned that in their life. Sometimes I have a sudden shock and I see people as they really are, without the glamorous energy that each one has learned. In magical practice that I don't know much about, there is something called a glamour. A glamour is like a kind of sparkling energy around you that you use to disguise what you really are. And I did have a sudden insight, a kind of revelation about the meaning of the idea that Jesus suffered for our sins. But I think now what it means is that he chose to suffer, because human beings do not suffer. They hide in their positive emotions. They want to get busy. They want to put on a good show and convince everybody that they're going somewhere. And so they avoid their wounds. But Jesus did not do that. He chose to suffer. He chose to be what he was and to undergo the work of transforming all those materials that were inside him and that are inside of us. And that is what that idea means. When we hear that Jesus has saved us all already, or alternatively that he is coming back to save us in the future, or perhaps a great king or a billionaire will save us, all of these ideas save us from the need to reach a very high level so that we become illuminated by our own efforts. In the same way, all spiritual practices have been diffused over time, and it's been extremely difficult and long for me to resurrect several of them, which I have described here, so that once again they do work. In the world today, people are being reduced to a kind of insect creature. There are polls going up everywhere. 5G, people are being controlled by their phones, by human rights, by health and safety, by the corporations. Everything is contained. And the fresh, earthy soil and your own initiative is fading away. I would say then that the earth herself is reconfiguring human beings to live in a very different way. The world is really like one long picnic or slow death or hazy dream, isn't it? Who is there on the earth that really minds all of this? If we go back to Saint Christina, she worked with the dark energies, with the negative emotions. She went into them because they are connected to the open roots of life, though they be dark. If you can use it as a kind of fuel and do double duty, then you can work day and night, even though the earth and the people sleep. I'm going to finish with one more extract from Gurdjieff about our unity. Of course, we hear people talk and say things all the time, but are these words that we hear from them really coming from their soul, coming from the journey and line of their journey, or are they just transient ideas that will be gone? Every thought, every mood, every desire, every sensation says I, and in each case it seems to be taken for granted that this I belongs to the whole man, and that a thought, a desire, or an aversion is expressed by this whole. In actual fact, there is no foundation for this assumption. Man's every thought and desire appears and lives quite separately and independently of the whole, and the whole never expresses itself for the simple reason that it exists only physically as a thing and in the abstract as a concept. Man has no individual I, but there are instead hundreds and thousands of small separate eyes, very often entirely unknown to one another, never coming into contact or, on the contrary, hostile to each other, mutually exclusive and incompatible. Each minute, each moment, man is saying or thinking I, and each time his I is different. Just now it was a thought, now it is a desire, now a sensation, now another thought, and so on endlessly. Man is a plurality. Now the reason for this is that we are an accreted being. It means that even if we do have a kernel or a core, we are formed of many various different kinds of energies that are inside of us in some way, but are not integrated. And far from being free and living in a democracy with human rights, we already have a very large amount of work. Everything that is not growing is dying. And I think to myself that it is even hard for me, given this level of ignorance, it is even hard to say whether the world is just or cruel, or whether I have been treated well or badly. Such is the level of ignorance. There are only things that I can do, and I must simply do them.
'cause you can't be here by my side. I need to say goodbye. And now my life is going through some changes. Going through some changes.